In this video, I will teach you how to do thematic analysis of interviews. This video will look at the two main approaches to doing thematic analysis, which are the inductive and the deductive approaches to thematic analysis. This is an in-depth video that will go step by step from understanding the philosophical basis of thematic analysis, highlighting which studies are ideal for thematic analysis, identifying the types of thematic analysis, conducting inductive thematic analysis, and conducting deductive thematic analysis. Now, let's understand the philosophical basis of thematic analysis. Generally, there are three main research philosophies that operate on different ontological and epistemological assumptions. The research philosophies include Positivism, Interpretivism, and Pragmatism. Now, let's understand what ontology and epistemology are before we explore the different research philosophies. Ontology basically deals with the nature of reality of what we can know. For example, is a given experience objective or subjective to each individual? Subjective experiences will be different to every individual, while objective experiences are the same for all individuals. For instance, you might want to investigate if individuals who attended a football match had different or similar experiences. Such an investigation is therefore based on ontology as we seek to understand the nature of reality. On the other hand, epistemology relates to how we can obtain knowledge and understand different phenomena. Epistemology will therefore deal with how we can figure out given phenomena and the limit of our knowledge. In this regard, through epistemology, we get evidence in order to rationally make certain conclusions. An example of how epistemology can help distinguish between coincidence and reliable knowledge is someone who believes it will rain tomorrow because they dreamt of it, even though they don't understand meteorology. If it does rain, their belief is true, but it wasn't justified without evidence or without specific rationality. Now, let's go back to research philosophies to see how both ontology and epistemology play within these philosophies and how we look at nature and our world. Let's start with positivism. The positivist research philosophy is based on the premise that knowledge can only be gained from neutral and measurable observations of action. According to the researchers who use the positivist research philosophy, if something is not measurable, it cannot be known for certain. In the positivist research philosophy, anything that cannot be observed, then measured and quantified is therefore of no importance. In positivist research philosophy, knowledge is either classified as either being true, false, or meaningless. In this research philosophy, other ways of knowing, such as introspection, intuition, and religious faith, are considered meaningless or rejected altogether. In this regard, the positivist research philosophy is in direct opposition to the philosophies we adopt in qualitative research. The positivist research philosophy is therefore mainly applied in quantitative research, such as when conducting experiments. For example, a study to determine the prevalence of a given condition in a given population adopts a positivist philosophy. Now let's look at another research philosophy, interpretivism. On the opposite edge of the spectrum of research philosophies is interpretivism. This research philosophy is based on the premise that reality is socially constructed and subjective. The interpretivism research philosophy posits that multiple realities can in fact exist and occur. Now, relying on the interpretivism research philosophy, we can only understand research subjects' reality through their experiences of that reality, which is subjective and will differ from one person to another based on social or historical perspective. Interpretive approaches to research will rely on observation and questioning in order to generate and discover a rich and deep understanding of specific phenomenon being investigated. For example, a researcher seeking to understand the impact of trauma on a given population that has undergone traumatic events may adopt an interpretative philosophy. Now, let's look at another philosophy of research, which is pragmatism. Although positivist and interpretative approach are in direct contrast to one another, the pragmatic research philosophy highlights that there are different ways of interpreting the world after a researcher has conducted research to investigate such reality. In this regard, combining different approaches may provide a broad understanding of phenomena that are being investigated. So, the pragmatic approach to research is guided by what will work in the given context and finding the best answers to questions under investigation. The pragmatic approach to research, therefore, will allow a researcher to conduct research in dynamic and innovative ways and to find solutions to problems. Pragmatic studies therefore investigate the different factors that might influence individual action in given situations. However, the main characteristic of pragmatism as a research philosophy is that pragmatists will acknowledge that their research inquiry will not lead to certainty. A pragmatic approach to research therefore does not assume there is one final truth and avoids fixed principles or abstract generalizations. Now, let's tie what we have learned up. Having clearly defined the three main research philosophies, including Positivism, Interpretivism, and Pragmatism, it's therefore evident that when we are conducting qualitative studies and we want to use thematic analysis in our research, the philosophy we will use is either Interpretivism or Pragmatism. Personally, I prefer the pragmatic approach because it's more flexible and more suited to thematic analysis approaches such as the Brown and Clark 6-step framework for thematic analysis. With this in mind, it means that we cannot make definitive statements about our results as one would find if they were conducting a quantitative study. So, those conducting quantitative studies only rely on the positivist research philosophy. Now, when conducting qualitative studies and when applying interpretive research philosophy, we therefore always leave a room for different interpretations of given phenomena. Now, let's look at which studies are ideal for thematic analysis. Generally, thematic analysis is an ideal approach to analyze qualitative data when one is trying to find out about 1. People's views, 2. Opinions, 3. Experiences, 4. Assessing people's knowledge about a given topic, 5. Assessing people's values or beliefs, and 6. Exploring questions about how people interpret their experiences and the meanings they attach to them. Now, what are the types of thematic analysis? The two main approaches to thematic analysis are the inductive and deductive thematic analysis. Let me interrupt this video for a minute and inform you of my services. My first type of service that I offer is consulting for anything related to qualitative data analysis using NVivo. You hop on a video call with me through Microsoft Teams or Zoom and I will help you become a pro with NVivo in a few hours. I also provide a done-for-you data analysis service. I do the manual coding and provide a data analysis report with the necessary visuals. Some kind of visuals I do include tables, hierarchy charts, and the framework matrix. Email or message me right now, details in the description. Let's understand first what is inductive thematic analysis. The inductive approach to thematic analysis involves deriving themes from qualitative data without any preconceptions. That means that we dive into the qualitative data such as interview transcripts and formulate codes, subthemes and themes from what the data provides. For example, let's say you are investigating the feelings of people after getting fired. You would investigate the themes that emerge from the interviews with such participants without any preconceived ideas of what you might find out. This would be an inductive approach to thematic analysis. An example of an inductive approach to thematic analysis is the Brown and Clark 6-step framework for thematic analysis. Now, we are going to conduct inductive thematic analysis through the Brown and Clark 6-step framework for conducting thematic analysis, which includes familiarizing yourself with the transcripts, generating initial codes, coming up with themes, reviewing and refining themes, providing clear descriptions of the themes, and writing the findings report. For this example, we are going to go through a study titled Teachers' Challenges in Executing Alternatives to Corporal Punishment in Secondary Public Schools. So this is a study, and I want to just be clear, where I get the transcripts and the studies I use is in a website called Figshare. So let me show you that website for your practice. Maybe you might want to practice qualitative analysis before you go and do your real work. You can go to figshare.com and look for transcripts like this. These are students who share their transcripts and they share it with everybody, and these are the kind of transcripts I use for my videos. So check out figshare.com if you need any resources for you to practice qualitative analysis. Back to my study title. For this example of inductive thematic analysis through the Brown and Clark 6-step framework for thematic analysis, I'm trying to analyze transcripts based on the study title, Teachers' Challenges in Executing Alternatives to Corporal Punishment in Secondary Public Schools. The research objectives are, number 1, to determine whether teachers support abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in their schools. Number 2, to evaluate the types and sources of discipline problems common in school. Number 3, to explore the alternatives to corporal punishment measures applied in school. Number 4, to determine the type of rewards teachers give to deserving learners and whether those rewards encourage them to be disciplined. Number 5, to determine whether disciplinary measures teachers take to discipline learners have been able to address the issue of indiscipline or disruptive behavior in their school. And number 6, to evaluate the teacher's perception of the role of parents and other stakeholders in maintaining discipline in the school. Those are a lot of objectives, but I want you to note down the objectives and to understand that the objectives have a significant role to play in analyzing qualitative data, because we only code data that contributes to our research questions or research objectives. So we don't code any data that does not relate to our research objectives, okay? So, teachers' challenges in executing alternatives to corporal punishment in secondary public schools. That is our study. Now, as you can see, I have 2 transcripts that I'm going to use for this video to give you an example of how to code inductively. The first step is familiarizing with the transcripts. I'm going to go through the transcripts and read through them like a story with no preconceived ideas of what I want to do or the analysis. Just read through all of them, okay? This is the first transcript. I read through the first transcript like a story, like I would do a novel. And then I go to the second transcript, which is interview 2, and I read through it just as I would read an article. Just go through it so that you get an idea of what the researcher is trying to find out, okay? So the first step is familiarizing with the transcripts. Then I move to the second step, which is what? Generating initial code. So this is a step where I normally use a computer-aided qualitative data analysis software, or CACDAS. For example, I use NVivo 14. So let's open NVivo. When I'm doing inductive, qualitative analysis, even deductive, I use this software to manage everything that I might have. The first thing you're going to see when you open NVivo is this area where we have new project and this blue menu on my left, okay? So new projects, let's call this sample project or CP sample. CP means corporal punishment. Just let me name it like that. Then you can put on a folder that you prefer. So mine is, let me just allocate it. Okay, so CP sample, and we can see, then I click on next. I want you to be careful when using NVivo. When you click on next, don't allow NVivo to ever autosave your project, because you might lose your data. Let me remind you, just go to display save reminder and input some minute. You can put or change this to 10. So every 10 minutes, NVivo is going to give us a reminder to save our work. That means we never have to lose any data if NVivo crashes, which happens many times. So again, I click on create project. Let's look at this. Remember, we are in the second step of conducting inductive thematic analysis, which is generating initial codes. So here we have opened NVivo. You can see NVivo has 2 main menus, the blue one and the top one. As a beginner, just focus on files and codes. Files, code. Don't worry about all the other functionalities. On files, what do we do on files? We import the files. There are 2 ways of importing our transcripts into NVivo. First is the drag and drop. I'm on file section. Remember, I'm clicking on file section. If I open my interviews, I drag and drop them in there. So that's one way of importing transcripts into NVivo. The second way is easy. Go to import, go to files, find the folder. Let me find the folder. This is the folder. and I go in here, I go to transcripts, and I click on that. I click import. I think that folder or that file is open in another document. Let me close that. Then click OK. So that's how you're going to, or you go to files. This is what I want. Click import. Basically, that's the second way you can import a file into NVivo. I have files and I have my 2 files. So let me begin coding. Now, the first thing we have to understand when we are coding, if I may just repeat, is we only code information that's important to our research question. We do not code information that's not relevant to our research topic, research questions, or research objectives. That's how we determine what to code and what not to code. Now, what are codes? Codes are interpretative or shorthand labels to information that's important to our research questions or objectives. With that definition of codes, I can begin coding. Remember, the title of the study is Teachers' Challenges in Executing Alternatives to Corporal Punishment in Secondary Public Schools. With that study title in mind, let me go to the code section of NVivo. Don't worry about this message, close it. We are going to create codes around here. Now, there is a way we can collapse this main menu, because right now I'm going to be dealing with 2 things. The transcript and the code section. I'm going to drag and drop the codes here. You can see an arrow pointing to the left. Let me click on that and collapse that. Let's go to number 1. Do you support the abolition? So this is an interview that a certain teacher conducted among other teachers to collect their views related to the abolition of corporal punishment in secondary schools. So let's go. Do you support the abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in your school? Give reasons for your answers. Here, I can create a code. I can create codes related to this question, to the other question. So, one thing or one major tip that I have in today's video, and this is how this video is different from the rest, is I want to teach you how to manage your data from different sub-questions that you ask in your interview. For example, do you support the abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in your school? Remember, we are doing inductive thematic analysis. That means we do not have a predetermined set of codes or themes that we are going to analyze or that we want to find in the data. No, we are creating the codes and then we are looking for a pattern of shared meaning between the codes to develop the themes. But we'll get to that. Let's get back to generating initial code. So, do you support the abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in your school? Give reasons for your answers. One way we can do this is, or we can begin coding here. You can see participant 1. Yes, I do support because corporal punishment is not an effective way to use to discipline learners. This person is saying corporal punishment is ineffective. So I can highlight this area and drag and drop to the blank area and say this. Corporal punishment is ineffective in disciplining students. Okay. So I want to paste that code here. Remember, I dragged and dropped the statement in a black area. Codes can be short or long, but they need to be as concise as naturally possible. So we might come here and edit these codes. Now, I want to show you how to manage codes from the same question so that you don't have a million codes lying outside here. How do we do that? If you right click on codes, this question, I can give it or go to color, okay? If you go to color, in NVivo, you'll notice different colors. I want to call the first question red, and I want to show you what that is. So you can see I've tagged this code as red. I'm using color codes to differentiate the codes I got from different questions. If I go back to the interview transcript and double click here, and let's just generate another code related to the first sub question that was asked by the interviewee. Yes, I do support it because corporal punishment is not an effective way to use to discipline learners. It can cause more harm than good. And learners who have been disciplined by using the practice of corporal punishment tend to have low self-esteem, and some can be depressed to an extent of committing suicide. Okay? So, corporal punishment can harm students. On voice typing. So, corporal punishment can harm students is a code. I won't tag this line. It can cause more harm than good. It can cause more harm than good. Drag, drop, I've coded that as corporal punishment can harm students. Remember, my codes are a bit descriptive, but coding is a very subjective process. You have to decide which is the most ideal code for this statement. So this is just a sample. If I was doing this work, I would take more time to understand the codes better. Basically, we need to understand the statements that the interviewees are providing so that we can tag them with the right codes. And learners who have been disciplined by using the practice of corporal punishment tend to have low self-esteem. I can code this statement as drag drop. Let's say corporal punishment contributes to low self-esteem among learners. Corporal punishment contributes to low self-esteem among learners. That's another code, and I paste. Okay? Then, and some of them can be depressed to an extent of committing suicide. Some of them. Let me call that corporal punishment can lead to depression. Cut and drag that statement and paste. Okay? Basically, I'm coding. Now, all these codes belong to sub-question 1 of the interview. How do I manage this data? Because I don't want to code the whole transcript. And finally, I'll have like 1,000 codes, which I don't know how they are related, okay? The secret I'm giving you is to assign a color code. Let's assign a color code for this. Let me just close the interview first. Another one here, go to color. Let's give it red. This means that these codes are related because they belong to the same sub-question. That's basically what I'm trying to do. Let's do another sub-question for this example so that I can show you how we move from there. I'm on question 2. What type of discipline problems are common in your school? Participant 1. The type of discipline problems that I encounter in the classroom of my school are, let me expand this. Let me go to codes. Remember, we are coding. The type of discipline problems that are common in your school. The types of discipline problems that I encounter in my classroom or school are fighting of kids, stroke learners. Fighting, drag, drop, call this fighting. But I don't want you to forget to color code. Remember the first one, we gave it a color of red. The second color there, dark blue. Let me open for you so that you can see. So you can see the difference. These codes came from sub-question 1. These are coming from sub-question 2. And I will use those color codes when looking for a pattern of shared meaning between the codes to form them, as you'll see later. So basically, I want to go back and go to files, or rather codes, okay? Fighting, okay? Let's look at, or let's keep coding here. Learners insulting one another. Learners insulting one another. That's a kind of indiscipline. So let me code that. Learners insulting one another. Pastes, that's another code. And that's another code that I'm color coding as what? Color dark blue. So you can see here. Again, let me close. You can see dark blue. That's another code that relates to that sub-question. Okay. And late coming. So late coming, drag drop, late, let me type this, late coming, click OK. We go to color dark blue. So you can see this codes came from research question or this sub-question. Let me open the interview transcripts. We are generating initial code. So these codes came from research sub-question 1, and the other set of codes which I've color-coded as blue came from research question number 2. So you can see the different color codes. This is very important. That's how we generate initial codes in NVivo. Now, after generating initial codes, I'm going to have as many codes as you can see here, okay? These are the many codes you're going to see. And now I can come in there. You have, in this case, I'm using the color code. So I can move to the third step of the Brown and Clark 6-step framework. for thematic analysis, which is generating initial theme. Now, I want to look at these three codes and then consider the question which the interviewer asked. Do you support abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in school? Give you a reason. These codes are related to the initial theme can be these codes in red. Okay? Look at these four codes. So, teachers support, you can see, teachers, they are talking about, and if you read the codes, you'll notice, corporal punishment can harm. They are talking about teachers' support of abolishing corporal punishment. Copy that, then paste that. Perfect. You can see teachers' support of abolition, not abolishing. Teachers' support of abolition or corporal punishment. That's good. You can see that. Teachers' support of abolition of corporal punishment. So that's a theme now. I want to show you why it's a theme. Because if you look at the shared pattern of meaning of this code, also inspired by the question that was posed by the interviewer, you can see 1, 2, these codes that I color-coded in red, I can drag and drop them under teacher support of abolition of corporal punishment as a theme. So I can go to code properties, right-click, go to code properties, and in this section, I can describe this theme. Now this is a theme. Why is it a theme? Because we have dragged and dropped codes under it. We are trying now to look for a pattern of shared meaning between our code to form themes. And you can also generate code purely inductively by just looking for the code for a pattern of shared meaning and creating new theme. Another, fighting late coming learners insulting one another. This one is what? These are examples of indiscipline in school. And that one also, we can get the question to get an idea of this theme. What type of discipline problems are common in your school? So we can say this one are common discipline problems in schools. Or common discipline problems in secondary schools. Let's go to codes. Again, to create a theme, it's just right-click, new code, paste, then provide a clear description of what this theme means. And now, go to these three codes that we color-coded in blue, meaning they have a shared pattern of meaning. Drag and drop them in there to call these common discipline problems in school. Now, people normally get stuck here where we have 0 and we have codes under there. So what do we do to solve this problem? We click on both our themes, right-click, go to aggregate coding from children, and click on that. Notice something that changes. 1 file, 3 references. That means 3 statements were provided to support thus the new theme that's emerging, which are common discipline problems in schools. So this is how we form theme. We look for a shared pattern of meaning between codes to get themes. But when you are conducting qualitative analysis, this is a tip I've given you, so that you can have well-organized work, is please ensure that you color code your codes, so that codes that come from the same question have different color codes, so that you can be able to look for a pattern of shared meaning between the codes to classify them together. Common discipline problems in schools, that's it. So basically, this is how we generate initial themes. Now, the next step in conducting thematic analysis or inductive thematic analysis through the Brown and Clark 6-step framework is reviewing and refining themes. We go to our themes and you can see now I've started reviewing and refining themes. For example, this theme, teachers support on the abolition of corporal punishment in enforcing discipline in their schools. You can see I try, and code properties, I try to explain what this theme means, and we have the codes that we had initially. In some instances, I might find that different codes can be merged together to form a sub-theme. This is a sub-theme, common discipline problems in school. So I keep revising this. You can see common discipline problems. I keep revising until they sound the way I want. So you can see this is another folder that I have. So I have folder 3, folder 4. So you can see I keep revising the themes until they sound better, which is the 4th step. In the 4th step, we are doing now the 2nd cycle of coding, where we are looking for our codes, which ones are the best or which ones do not combine together. We are combining together codes with similar meaning through the process of inductive thematic analysis. We are eliminating codes that do not make sense, we are reviewing, we are deleting, we are merging, and finally you can see in some instances I have themes and codes, in some instances I have subthemes. For example, subtheme 1, common discipline problems, is not the same as experiences with indiscipline cases. Those are two different meanings. Actually, we even have areas with categories. So we can move from theme to subtheme to category to codes, okay? Depending on a shared pattern of meaning. So I've shown you how we reassign things, and we do that. This is the fourth step of the Brown and Clark 6-step framework for conducting thematic analysis, which is reviewing and refining them. Now, the fifth step of inductive thematic analysis is adding descriptions or clearly defining your theme. If you go to theme 1, my theme, go to code properties, you will see I've added very clear descriptions of every theme, even subthemes in many instances. Look at that subtheme. Remember, my structure is some areas have codes connected to themes, some areas have themes, subthemes, categories, and codes. Basically, the structure is dependent on the meaning that is provided by the interviewee. You do not force a structure. When we are reviewing and refining themes, we are clearly checking our work one more time, looking for the agreement between codes to form a pattern of shared meaning, which forms subtheme, and then looking for a pattern of shared meaning between the subthemes, which forms themes, and then we are providing very clear descriptions of our themes. Basically, that's what I'm doing in this revision so that I can have what you can see I call final themes. Now, the sixth and final step in conducting inductive thematic analysis is writing or coming up with the findings report. I want to show you the findings report that I came up with. This is my findings report, which includes the data analysis process. Now, we have some visuals such as tables. When I finish my work, the first thing that I do is I come to my final themes, or I get to my final themes. I click Ctrl A on my Windows, go to export, okay, export list. When I export the Excel, I will get this. This is an Excel showing the coding structure and important numbers. Files is the number of participants. Remember, in this case, I only had 2 participants. But if I was doing this as a project, I would have 10, 20 participants. Files is participant. References are the statements. Participant quotes. So if you look at this, if you click on 1, we have the themes. 2, we have the what? Themes and subthemes in some instances. 3, we have 3 subthemes and codes. And basically, that's the coding structure. I will use this for tables such as this one in my final report. Let me open this findings report again. You can see I have a table, for example, initial code. I got this table from that Excel, which you get from NVivo. The first step of my findings report is to describe or to explain the data analysis process. Another person can come and read this and understand. Another thing is to provide clear descriptions like this. This one, we got them from the code book. You can go to share, export code book. Let me show you the code book also. This is the code book. The code book includes any description that we provided for our codes. These two, the code book and the code list, the Excel file, we can attach them in the appendix to support the work that we do. So you can see a code book there. Then the rest is just an explanation of the report. By the way, I'm going to attach all these resources for you in a folder that will be free. Just go and access it. I'm going to attach the NVivo file. This is the NVivo file, the Excel list, or the findings report, everything. I'm going to attach them. Be sure to check link in the description and you can use these resources. Let me continue with my findings report. You can see a findings report is just based on what? Explanation of what a researcher was trying to find out and the answers. You can see, for example, here I describe what the themes is trying to explain and then the answers by participant and participant excerpts. So that's how I organize my findings report. You can see I have very many tables in here. I showed you how to draw those. Sometimes I draw something like this called mind map. I'm going to attach a video on visualization and how I come up with such a thing. I'll link it also in the description. This is a hierarchy chart. Let me show you how I drew a hierarchy chart. If you go to theme 1, just go to theme 1. Let's say we want a hierarchy chart for this subtheme. Right click, go to visualize and go to hierarchy chart of codes. And basically, that's how I drew that. That's the hierarchy chart that I drew. Then Ctrl-Shift-E and you export that. That's how I came up with a very comprehensive findings report after analyzing my data. I'm going to attach all these resources, and let me summarize what we've done. We went through the 6 steps of conducting inductive thematic analysis, and we used the Brown and Clark's 6-step framework, which includes familiarizing with the transcripts, generating initial codes, generating initial themes, reviewing and refining themes, providing clear definitions and descriptions for themes, and finally, writing the findings report.
Let me interrupt this video for a minute and inform you of my services. My first type of service that I offer is consulting for anything related to qualitative data analysis using NVivo. You hop on a video call with me through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and I will help you become a pro with NVivo in a few hours. I also provide a done-for-you data analysis service. I do the manual coding and provide a data analysis report with the necessary visuals. Some kind of visuals I do include tables, hierarchy charts, and the framework matrix. Email or message me right now, details in the description.
Now, let's look at the second main approach to thematic analysis, which is the deductive approach. The deductive approach to thematic analysis involves developing a predetermined set of themes and subthemes, and then diving into the qualitative data to look for codes to match the predetermined set of themes and subthemes. The deductive approach is mainly informed by empirical research, existing theories, or prior knowledge. The deductive approach is therefore suitable when researchers are conducting confirmatory research, where they have structured interviews and want to find out specific information. An example of the deductive approach to thematic analysis is the codebook approach. We are going to use the codebook approach to conduct deductive thematic analysis through the following steps: identifying theoretical framework or research area, developing coding schemes or codebook, which is made up of themes, developing a clear description of the themes, then generating codes and assigning them to themes, and finally, reporting the findings. Let's look at the first step of conducting deductive thematic analysis, which is identifying the topic of study or theoretical frameworks. I want to give you an example. This is a study or the sample study I'm going to use for this video, which is I'm conducting a confirmatory study in which the researcher is trying to assess the impact of concurrent verbalization. Let me just explain to you, although this is not your discipline, what concurrent verbalization is. Concurrent verbalization is also known as thinking aloud, is a technique where participants verbalize their thoughts while performing a task. Such a study therefore lends itself to the deductive thematic analysis because it's a confirmatory study which assesses the impact of a given phenomena or the impact of concurrent verbalization. Basically, that's the study I'm trying to conduct. Now, we have a topic of study or a theoretical framework. Now, what's the next step in deductive thematic analysis? The second step in deductive thematic analysis is coming up with a codebook. Now, when you're conducting deductive thematic analysis, you will use the questions that were asked to come up with a kind of a code book. You can see the questions that were being asked. For example, the first question is, which chapter did you focus on during your concurrent verbalization sessions? I have created a theme there, chapters of focus during concurrent verbalization sessions. Then you can see the second question, and how do you feel writing of that chapter went? How did it go? So this one is other experiences writing the chapter. Then, what challenges did you encounter when writing the chapter? Is there something you can expand on in addition to the ones you've just discussed? So these are challenges experienced by the author during the writing experience. And finally, other comments that you have about how the concurrent verbalization went, because it's kind of where we are. So other experiences during concurrent verbalization. I can add the word during there. Then additional comment. Basically, I can come up with a code book or a coding scheme from these issues. It's easy. What I'll do is to open a blank Word document here and draw a table. Go to insert. Let's insert this theme. This is our coding structure. Theme. Description. Theme, description, okay? So let's start with the first one, chapters of focus during concurrent verbalization. Let me just go in here and just paste that. Chapter of focus during concurrent verbalization. And let's just take this. Which chapter did you focus on during concurrent verbalization? The description is, let me just voice type this. I'm voice typing. The chapters the participants focused on during concurrent verbalization. During concurrent verbalization. This is the description. This is the code book. This is what we are calling the code book or the coding scheme. Basically having all the themes and their descriptions before we begin the coding process. The main difference between deductive and inductive thematic analysis is that when we are conducting deductive thematic analysis, we come up the main themes or the main categories or the main issues we want to look at a priori. A priori means we come up with the major themes before we code. Then inductive is we look at the data and the data will give us the themes. Deductive is we come up with the theme, then we look for data to support the themes. Those are the differences between deductive thematic analysis and inductive thematic analysis. I'm just transferring because I had taken time to write down this kind of themes I wanted to find out. Other experiences writing chapter. So other experiences writing chapter. Let's look at the description for that. And how did you feel like that chapter went? So these are the experiences and feelings of the author writing a specific chapter. Let me just correct this. These are the experiences and feelings of the author writing a specific chapter. Writing a specific chapter. That's what I have. And then we are going to go in there and get another theme, this theme, and we get a description for it. Let me find a description. This one is challenges the author might have experienced while writing the chapter. So basically, I'm going to go in there and get all my main themes. Okay, this is the fourth one. Then copy it into my codebook or coding scheme, other experiences, and bring it up here. Concurrent verbalization experiences. This is just a highlight. So that is the second step of deductive thematic analysis. Remember, the first step is coming up with the topic and looking at the theoretical frameworks affecting that topics so that we can conduct a confirmatory study. Or we only can do deductive thematic analysis when you're trying to do a confirmatory study to confirm something. For example, this study is about the impact of concurrent verbalization. This is the code book. The study is about the impact of concurrent verbalization. So the second step in deductive thematic analysis is coming up with a coding scheme or the coding framework. And this coding framework is the one we are going to use to go and look for codes. We match them to this coding framework or the themes. and we are done. While still doing the coding framework, I've still done the fourth step, which is providing a clear description of the themes that we are going to use in the coding effort. And then finally, fitting the data into the themes. So when we come to fitting the data into the themes, this is a step I want to conduct right now. I want to show you this step. Basically, we have NVivo, okay? This is NVivo. We open a new project. I want to call this project just Deduct. Then I click on next. Remember to save for 10 minutes. Don't allow autosave as we did in the previous inductive project. We are going to import our transcript. So there are two ways to import transcript. You can go to import and go to files, import there, or you can look for the transcript. This is a transcript I want to import, and you can drag and drop it in the file section of NVivo. I think they are saying it's open. Let me close it. Let's try again. Let's say okay. Going to import, I hope so. Or we are going to try again. Here we have the transcript. Drag and drop it in there. And that's it. Stay with okay. Basically we have files and we have codes. So file is where we are going to have our file, and now we're going to come and start analyzing. But for deductive thematic analysis, after we import the transcripts, the next thing we do is to import the code structure into NVivo, because for deductive thematic analysis, it's an issue of getting the coding framework in here, then going and getting codes and fitting them into the coding framework. What do I mean? Code book we just created. This is the first theme, okay? So let me copy that theme. Let me come to NVivo. I'm in the code section. Right click, click on new code and paste that. I can call that number 1. Or I can call it even theme 1. Basically, we adjust these themes that we had in our code book into NVivo. And you can create them into NVivo in the second step. I want to go to code properties here, and I want to add the description for that theme. So every theme should have a description. Then we do the same for the second theme, okay? So let's go in here and go to other experiences, writing a chapter. And then new code, paste. And then I'm going to call this theme number, of course, theme number 2. And then I'm going to call this copy and paste. And then I'm going to call this theme number 3, challenges experienced. And then I'm going to new code and then paste. And we can call this theme number 3. That's it. And then I'm going to have theme number 4. And then in theme number 4, I'm going to have concurrent verbalization experiences. Basically, that's the code structure that I have. Remember, I'm in the code section of NVivo. Put your code structure here. And now come in and go to the final step, which is signing the codes into the theme. This is deductive, where we come up with the themes before a priori, then we find codes to match into the themes, okay? So let's look at the interview. Let me start here. Which chapter did you focus on during your concurrent verbalization session? That will go to theme 1. If you remember, our theme 1 is about chapters of focus during concurrent verbalization. So I focused on, I'm just gonna make sure that I call it the same thing. We call it here, or bear with me, good idea, choosing integrity chapter. Chapters of focus during concurrent verbalization. drag and drop that, it's choosing integrity chapter. Choosing integrity chapter. So that's the chapter of focus, choosing integrity chapter. Okay. Now let's read. I focused on ethical use of sources. Then plagiarism. We can see here the author also says they focused on or we can call these issues of focus in the chapter. You might ask why I've decided to create that. That's like a sub-theme, okay? And this thing emerges all the time when you're analyzing. You don't have to be mechanical. So issues of focus in the chapter, you can see I'll just take this and put it under the theme, because under the issues of focus, I want to drag and drop ethical use of sources. You see? So ethical use of sources, drag and drop, it's under issue of focus. Then plagiarism and its consequences. Okay, that's another thing they focused on, plagiarism. Plagiarism, sorry, I have a misspelling. I go to code properties, I go to plagiarism, and its consequences, aggregate coding from children. Basically, I'm just getting codes for that. I can try for them too, although I've not exhausted that. I'll go into more detail when I show you the complete thing. This. And how did you feel writing of that chapter went? How did it go? It was good, so interesting. So, great experience writing the chapter is a code. Remember, I'm just dragging and dropping my codes here, then I'll drag and drop them in there. Great experience writing the chapter. Drag and drop it. Remember, we right click, go to aggregate coding from children so that these numbers can change. If you read this, I think because we are both very introspective sometimes about what we do as writers. So I think it was kind of thought the chapter was quite, so we do because I think we are both very introspective sometimes about what we do as writers. So it was kind of, I thought about the chapter quite beforehand. So took time to plan for the chapter. By the way, I can also code by right clicking and go to code to recent code. And then I can code this to, of course you can see, I can code this to I can go to code selection. I can put that under theme 2. Let me create a new child code in there and call this what? Planned. I can type here. Planned for the chapter before writing, and go to create new code. You can see that code will go in there. So that's another way. If you can't be able to drag and drop, that's another way of creating code. You highlight the code, you right click, you go to code selection, you put a point like I want this under theme 2, then create new child code, then you create. If it's theme 3, you click, create new child code, then you create. Basically, that's how we code. So in deductive thematic analysis, I'm going to go through the full transcript and get all the code and assign all the codes that I'll find into the themes that we already established a priori or before we began analysis. This is the file, and I've gone through the whole file and done and assigned the codes to the main theme. Remember, this is deductive thematic analysis. So let's look at that's my file. You can see everything I've coded a lot. Let's go to my codes. You can see I started with the main themes and assigned the codes. Then I kept revising, especially in the codes area. What was changing are the codes, not the themes. These are the themes, these are the codes. I revised the codes. Remember, we assigned the codes into that, and these are the themes and the codes. Some places we have sub-themes, which is possible. And this is my whole coding structure. I can also show you what I did after I completed the coding. I exported an Excel, which I can show you here. This is an Excel list of the codes you can see. Okay, how I got this is going to my work, going to the final theme section. Let me close everything for now. Let me use the negative sign to close, then Control A on your computer, then go to export, then export list. That's what I did, and that's the themes and the codes. I assigned the codes to the themes which we had established. Now the final step, after we code and we assign the codes into our pre-established or predetermined themes, is we write the findings report. I have taken time to write my findings report, which I'm going to show you here. Basically, the findings report is made up of what? Description of the data analysis process. That's what I do here. I describe the data analysis process and the predetermined themes and sub-themes in some instances. Actually, these are only predetermined themes. And then I have the coding structure. I've given an example. Then I discuss the themes. There are these tables, which I showed you. I exported from NVivo. You can also watch my video on visualization, where you'll see how I made all this. For example, this is called a mind map, and we can try make one. If you go to theme 2, right click, go to explore maps, mind map, then call this any number you want. Then we can draw one here. Just a matter of code properties. I copy this, then we move here, we double click, then we paste. Okay, then I want to create the codes for it, and I can come here and copy and paste. Then I can come here and copy and paste. Okay, that's how I do those mind maps, and I took time to write the report. The report is made up of what? Visuals, the data analysis process, and an explanation. This theme means this and this, and the participant excerpts. What did participants say to support our interpretation? So these are the participant excerpts, and a description of meaning that we were trying to capture, the shared pattern of meaning and visuals, and that is the report. I'm going to share my complete NVivo with the theme structure that I just imported and the codes that I got finally. I'll also share all these resources, including the code book. By the way, I also exported another code book from NVivo with the numbers. So how do we do that? I just come here, Control or go to share, export code book. So that's the code book I got from NVivo. I exported everything that is of importance, and those are the 5 steps we use to conduct deductive thematic analysis. I have more in-depth video on deductive thematic analysis alone, and a more in-depth video on inductive thematic analysis, which I'm going to share in the description. Basically, that's how we conduct deductive thematic analysis. Thank you very much, and all the best as you keep analyzing your data.
Remember, I provide done-for-you data analysis services and consulting services for any problem or challenge related to NVivo. Check the link and email in the description and talk to me right away. Thank you.